Do you want to kick off and tell us a little bit about who you are? Obviously, you're the serverless man, Jan. I think that's how the industry knows Jan. But do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are, why you're here, and maybe some topics that we'll cover?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jan Trey, and I've been, working with AWS for quite a long time now. So I think it's coming to about 10 years since I started using AWS. I remember very clearly that in those early days, you look at the console, there's about 9 different icons. There's an icon, there's a picture of a service, a name and description. And over the years, the icon went away, descriptions went away, and now you've got like 4 different pages that you have to scroll down to see all the services. So we're doing stuff on AWS, running stuff at scale for quite a while. And last couple of years, I've been working mostly with serverless technology. By that I mean Lambda and other things that you come to AWS. So been doing a lot of that last 3-4 years, and in my spare time I've also been sharing a lot of things that I've learned along the way. At this point I've probably written over 150 articles on various different aspects of how to
was up for hours last night.
And I also got a video course with Manning and a video course myself, and also now starting to work with Peter Spassky and from Cloud Guru, and there's AJ from AWS, the project manager or product manager for serverless, on the second edition of their book, Serverless Architectures on AWS. So I've been doing a lot of work in sort of community space. So AWS made me one of their community heroes on the focus on a serverless space. So that's give you some nice, benefits in that I get roadmap updates every quarter, and also importantly, free ticket to reInvent.
We'll get to that. Relax, don't get excited.
Which is pretty sweet. Sorry.
No. Sorry, I was going to say, how do you find so much time to invest yourself in all of this? Because I looked at your Medium, and you're really, really in the know of a lot of different facets. We're going to cover things on security, authentication, authorization, whatever. How do you find the time, and how do you learn and hold that?
Yeah, so I think in terms of learning, writing is a massive part of my process, because if I want to write about something and explain it in terms that anyone can pick up and understand, it means that I need to understand it quite well myself. And also, as you're writing, you start to notice gaps in the knowledge. So you can't get the sentences quite linked together. And so I think that is also a big part of my learning process. But otherwise, I like to do a lot of experiments, what you probably describe as exploratory experiments, to find, I wonder how does that thing work? I wonder what happens when this thing fails, and how that affects Lambda and so on. Then I design this experiment. I run it and test it, and then I kind of build up a better mental model of how things work under the hood. In terms of finding the time, I don't have a lot of a social life. I'm married. We don't have kids. We have no cats. So that does mean that I have a lot less social responsibilities. So I do spend most of my free time just
good for you
writing stuff.
I love that.
Doing code and
good for you.
Having fun.
Tell us a little bit about some of the journey of working with companies and where you've introduced companies. Now, actually, sorry, before that, let's talk about what actually is serverless for all of our listeners out there. What is serverless, and what does it mean?
So when I think about serverless, I think about any technology where you don't have to think about provisioning, configuring servers, so you don't have to configure scaling, load balancing, all that stuff, and you don't have to worry about and pay for servers when you're not using them. So I guess my definition for serverless is that a service that you don't pay for it when you don't use it, and that you don't have to worry about provisioning and managing the underlying infrastructure for running your code. So I guess you can classify things like DynamoDB, S3, SQS, all of those in that same bracket, and that they are serverless. And in terms of the actual functions, so that's where you have functions as service, which is quite closely related sort of term. That's where you find things like Lambda, you find Google Cloud Functions, Azure functions, and so on. So for me, that's what serverless means. So it doesn't have to be function Lambda, but it can be other things so long they have that same quality in terms of don't pay for it when you're not using it, and don't worry about actually what hardware it runs on, what OS it runs on, and provisioning, scaling, all of that.
Okay. Yubble's journey is quite prevalent on Medium for you. Can we talk about that journey? I know you've worked with DAZN and helped them on their serverless journey as well. We won't talk about DAZN so much, but Yubble's journey is quite prevalent. Can we talk about some of that at all?
Yeah. So Yubble was this social network that I worked at in 2016 for about 8 months until the company ran out of money. But when I got there, it was an interesting case whereby it's a company that was well funded, but then they squandered a lot of their funding on, I guess, poor hiring, some of the poor technical organizational decisions. So by the time we got in there, it was an app that was loaded with technical debt, not technical debt, technical mess. The system wouldn't scale. Also really hard to maintain and sort of debug. So we looked at what we actually do in terms of the workloads we're doing, and that it actually seems quite a nice fit with the serverless paradigm, and we should be able to go a lot faster once we address a lot of the underlying technical issues that we had. So we had a few people join the team at that point, and we pretty much migrated the entire social network to run on serverless, using all kinds of different services, Lambda being the most prominent, but then at the same time, we use lots of API gateway, a lot of Kinesis for event processing, but also SNS, SQS, IoT Core for very different kind of workloads. So before the company went under, we were actually in the process of publishing us as a use case, as a case study for AWS, because they found us very interesting that we have a very broad range of different workloads, all using serverless technologies. So unfortunately, that never finished, and the company ran out of money and went into administration. So we didn't get the use case study finished. But that was probably where I learned the most about what it actually takes to build something non-trivial and a complex serverless architecture.
What are the pros for devs and businesses using serverless?
So for developers, I spent a lot of my career just setting up EC2 instances, setting up all the scaling, load balancers, or network configuration, all of that. And you find yourself spending a lot of your time on doing the things that you need to do to get to the point of being able to do the things that the business actually wants you to do, or the customer wants you to do. So using serverless technology means that you can offload a lot of that responsibility to AWS, who can honestly do a much better job than most of us can anyway. And we focus our energy on doing the things that only we can do for our customers, delivering features, delivering better user experience and all of that, whilst you can also save a lot of money. So from a business perspective, for a lot of the workloads that when you move them to serverless, because you don't pay for them when they're not running, so that means that you can also save a lot of money as well for the right workload. You have to match to the right workload. So at Yubble, when we moved to serverless, we found that our bill for Lambda was about 5% of what we pay for EC2 for the comparable amount of things that we were doing. And the same story you've heard from, I think, Financial Engine in the US. Again, massive savings in terms of cost. And companies like iRobot, they choose serverless for one of the reasons was because of the cost efficiency. And for them, it's very important because they don't charge you for the use of the cloud services. So they have to keep those running costs as low as they can because they only charge you for the robots. So from a business perspective, you get the benefit in terms of the developers being more productive, being able to deliver things faster, and having hopefully saving some costs as well on your AWS bill. But from the sort of cost perspective, it's also important to understand that the fact that you only pay for things when they run means that you can now make more informed decisions about where do we optimize for cost. If it's something that runs a lot but doesn't run a lot, so there's no point optimizing it, even if it's suboptimal. Whereas if it's a function that runs all the time and it's, that's where all of your cost is going to, then you should just focus on optimizing that one thing. And those are the kind of decisions that before it's just really hard to make because you can't quite pinpoint which bit of your infrastructure that is actually costing all of your money because it's all shared EC2 instances and your shared infrastructure.
Is there lack of clarity in infrastructure when it's non-serverless then? Are there dashboards and so forth to support you to see?
You don't have the way to attribute costs to specific components in the same way that you can with serverless technologies. When you've got like a server that's running a thing, Well, it doesn't matter how many people use it, you're going to be paying for that. And also different services use the same server, then you can't really attribute the cost for individual features. So when it comes to working out the return on investment for individual features, you can't even work out how much it's really costing you to run that thing. And from the developers, you also get the sense that you are more productive, you're happier. So a lot of teams I work with, they really, really want to work with serverless because there's so much less things you got to worry about. And people tend to be more happy and relaxed when they don't have to worry about server going down and have to make sure they've got the right configurations and all of that stuff, because it all happens automatically by managed by AWS.
Okay, so if a company's listening and they have a monolith, what is the best way, or where do you start to think about going on your serverless journey?
Yeah, I think one of the most important thing from a technical perspective is that you start by looking at your business, your application, and trying to find boundary context, basically an area where your system can be completely autonomous in terms of and owns the data that you need to operate on. And so that you can safely take that and then move into a separate service. So I will also start with, especially when you're new to serverless, start with areas where it's less business critical.
Right.
Because if you're new at something, the first time you use that to build anything, it's going to suck. It's going to have problems. So give yourself room to make those mistakes and not have the mistake hit you so hard that you can never recover from. So that is one step to think about, but also understand that, especially for bigger companies, you can't just entirely rely on a technical solution to solve all your problems. You also need to look at how your company is organized in terms of teams. And I've seen companies whereby they move towards microservices, move towards serverless, but things don't improve. They don't go any faster because you have the teams that are supposed to be able to own and operate on their services independently, but they all have to go through some central team to get infrastructure provision, to get access to things. So all of those things start to stop you. So it doesn't matter what technology advancement you use.
It is down to the people as well.
Absolutely. Any organization that develops software or systems is a social technical organization. So a social technical organism. So just looking at the technical side is never going to be good enough. The two of them feed on each other and helps and reinforces each other. Good. So you have to look at how you organize your organization in terms of people, but also how you allow people to work. You do want to give people more autonomy especially when you go serverless, because if the team have to go to some other team to provision all these different resources, then you're going to take away a lot of benefits that you get from serverless in terms of having teams that are able to do more with themselves without having to manage all these infrastructure themselves and so on.
Tech and people focused.
Yep, absolutely.
Good. Okay.
Hand in hand.
Good. What happens, or what would you recommend if a company already has existing microservices and they want to move to serverless? What do you need to think about and consider then?
So again, start by finding microservices that has got low business criticality, and allow yourself the chance to make mistakes. I guess another thing I didn't mention is that especially for bigger companies, find a team that and use them as the pathfinder, so that they find out all the sort of edge cases or the problem you're going to solve, especially when you're going from monolith to serverless. But going from microservice to serverless I find a lot easier, because as you already experienced a lot of the challenges that microservices has in terms of the complexity around the debugging things, but also in terms of the performance overhead for talking to API to API. So you understand those challenges, and you probably have really fast solutions for them for your containerized application. So now you just need to find solutions for the serverless that can still deliver the same qualities, same characteristics, but maybe implemented differently. Because with the microservices, a lot of time you're looking at people that use containers. You're looking at sidecars and other service mesh and other things, which as a pattern, it works really well when you have access to the infrastructure. But when you move to serverless, you no longer have the same assets anymore, which means you have to find other solutions, which they do exist. But it doesn't mean that you should take the time to do some research before you go straight into it and try to use what you've known already and try to just lift and shift the existing mindset, which is where oftentimes companies run into trouble, because they refuse to learn the new thing, how to work with the new paradigm.
Have you seen a couple of cases where companies smiling? Have you seen a couple of cases where companies have failed is maybe a strong word, but there's been a couple of moments where they've thought, shit, this wasn't as easy as we thought. And can you share those with us? Because no doubt people watching or companies watching, they might encounter those.
Yeah, that's basically my entire business model.
Yeah, well, okay, good. We like that.
So as a consultant, oftentimes people engage me because they realize, okay, this is harder than we thought, or we are struggling, or we run into trouble. Ideally, people should engage me earlier as a consultant to help them basically tell them, think about that, rather than, oh crap, we've got problems, we can't do this. But nonetheless, that seems to be what happens a lot of time.
Okay.
Where I come into companies, of course, I'm not going to name anybody, and realize that they either have, for example, not addressed the people side of things.
Yeah.
So they have been using the same process that they've been using for others. How they've always been doing things. Yeah. Centralized teams controlling the gates of the kingdom. And they find out, okay, other teams, when they move to serverless, they are just getting blocked constantly. Yeah. Even though they themselves can move faster for the application, but they get stopped at the moment they have to interact with the central team. Okay. Yeah. And then they also got companies that are not aware of some of the good practices when it comes to serverless, and try to do lift and shift, and they find that, okay, they don't get the same performance they were expecting. They don't, they run into other issues in terms of security, in terms of scalability, because they just try to take the existing application and just try to run it inside Lambda as if it's just another container. Fine. Okay. For example, and also other issues such as not understanding how logging, monitoring, all the observability side of things. How does that work with a serverless, which does require different mindset to think about them. Okay. You get a lot of things out of the box, but you do need to know about those things, and also how to go from, okay, CloudWatch is okay, but we've gone beyond that in terms of our complexity. What's the next thing available? Okay. Again, solutions are out there. They're well-defined solutions as well, with different caveats. Yeah. But you need to know what they are, and that's where often myself would provide value, because I understand those, and understand the trade-offs, and I can give them more, useful feedback in terms of what they should be doing.
Good. Okay. You touched on observability, and that probably falls into a really nice moment with what you're discussing next month in Vegas.
Yep.
Okay. So building observability in a serverless application, don't panic. This will be posted after AWS reInvent, right. So there's going to be no spoilers. But can you talk to us about what you're going to talk about, and maybe some of the key elements you have to think about when you're thinking about building observability?
Yeah, sure. So the key thing about observability is that you have this ability to debug things and figure out the issue when they do happen in production. And one of the common mindset I see is developers, in terms of debugging, all they want is to be able to run everything locally and then just step through the code. And of course, the moment your application is running in the cloud, well, you can lose all of that. So you need to have really good, you need to have good infrastructure in place so that you collect the logs for all your functions. You're writing good logs so that they're easy to search, and also they have all the information you need. And then you also need to be able to have metrics that you can monitor things on, but also having tracing and alerting, all those things that we already know how to do, and they can be relatively easily replicated to serverless as well. You just have to know the right tools, the right paradigm to apply. And the ways people tend to struggle a little bit when it comes to serverless is just existing tools requires installing an agent on the box, right? Which of course you can't. There's nowhere for you to install them anymore. Okay. And data collection is a different paradigm to containerized or EC2 based services. And in terms of what I'm going to be talking about in the session is a chalk talk, so it's more of a deep dive into a particular domain. So I'm going to be talking about a lot of the tools that you get out of the box with AWS. Okay. When to use them, how to use them well, and also what's the limitations. And also I'm going to look at some of the commercial solutions. One of which is Lumigo, because I'm also working with those guys as well. And also some open source tools, some of which I built myself, that also helps you apply good practices when it comes to logging and supporting correlation IDs through HTTP and asynchronous workflows, and how to make sure that all of that gets propagated to a central place in, for all your logs so that you can easily find things just using some information you find from a error message or from a customer feedback.
Good. And what is your logging tool?
It's not logging tool, but it's a collection of library that does a number of different things, including having a good logger. It's called the Zone Lambda Power Tools.
I like that.
It's something that I developed before, and then at the Zone I kind of packaged it even nicer,
just kept them going, and
open sourced it just before I left the Zone. So it's been going well. It's got quite nice adoption now.
Good. Okay, I'll check it out after. Testing and CI/CD. You're obviously active on Twitter all the time, but I got you involved in a couple of conversations. Does the mindset change at all when you think about testing and CI/CD in a serverless environment? And what tools would you recommend and why? I appreciate that's probably dependent on what problems or applications you have, but what would you recommend from your experience when it comes to testing and CI/CD?
Right. So when it comes to testing, I guess the mindset you do have to think of change. You do have to change your mindset. I guess the similar kind of change in mindset when you go from monolith to microservices, whereby the traditional wisdom is that you write a lot of unit tests, few integration tests, and even few acceptance tests that are end to end. But when you go to microservices, people start to realize that your system becomes simpler and simpler. You're dedicating more and more things to other services or other systems that you write yourself. So you start writing fewer unit tests, but still a lot of integration tests, because that's where the problem tends to happen. Is when your code start to integrate with other things, and then you also write fewer acceptance tests still because they take a long time to execute. I think the same mindset change applies to serverless as well. That the unit test just doesn't have a lot of return on investment because most of my functions are so simple that they don't have any complex business logic. I almost never write any unit tests unless I've got a bit of function that is quite complicated in terms of business logic. Then I write unit tests for those. But I do have lots of integration tests that checks my code is doing the right thing when it comes to talking to DynamoDB or any other number of AWS services. So that's one mindset change. And also for me, I find that a lot of the time when you're writing tests that just relies on mocks, all you're testing is the mock. So as much as possible, I try to write my integration test such that it talks to real AWS services. Where I do use mock still is when I want to simulate failure scenarios to try my code's error handling, but also when I'm talking to internal services that are produced by my company where there's less stability and guarantee about the contracts and all of that, then I'll still use mocks for those, just so that one person breaks one service, it doesn't affect everybody else. When it comes to CI/CD, I think what you find with a lot of these containerized or EC2-based workload when it comes to CI pipeline is that a lot of the work is actually in terms of bundling, managing the artifacts and triggering deployments, doing blue-green, all of that stuff, which thankfully most of that is done by serverless, by Lambda itself. The whole uploading artifact, a new artifact, just uploading to S3, and the blue-green, you just get it out of the box. And then the rest, in terms of some of the packaging your code, all of that, some of the frameworks like serverless framework does all of that for you. So for me, most of the time, I have a very simple script that allows me to encapsulate all the different steps I want to do in my CD pipeline, CI/CD pipeline, like running unit tests, running acceptance tests, and then doing deployment. And then all my CI is doing is coding to my script. And then that means I'm also not tied to any specific CI tool. I can easily switch from one to another because all the steps are already encapsulated into a simple script. So that's the kind of convention I tend to go with.
Nice, good, okay. Big question, to VPC or not to VPC? What do you think?
Has become a lot simpler because of the fact that AWS has changed the way VPC works. So now for regions where this VPC enhancement has gone out to, you no longer have a 10-second cold start whenever you need a new ENI. So if you're operating in one of those regions, which as of this right now is, I think, Ohio, Tokyo, Frankfurt, Ireland, and maybe four others, relatively small regions, then VPC as much as you need. Don't VPC, just for the sake of it, because Lambda is already protected by IAM, so you're not going to add anything with just VPC, but it doesn't really hurt you as much as it used to. everywhere else, for now, until your region is updated with the hard VPC enhancement, don't use VPC unless you really, really, really have to, because it's going to cause a lot of complexity and also really painful code start time.
Okay. You touched on IAM.
Yep.
What sort of things do we or should companies and devs think about when it comes to security, authorization, authentication? Massive topics at the moment. Are there gaps for exploitation in serverless, or are you well protected, or do devs have to do this themselves? How does it work?
So security is, as you mentioned, is a very big topic, but also a very broad topic. There's all kind of different angles attackers can get into. With serverless, the main thing that's improved a lot, and it is a really big thing, is that you no longer have to worry about the security of the underlying infrastructure, the server, the networking around the server, because Lambda is running on ultimate EC2 instances that are managed by AWS within their own VPC. So no one can just log on to a server that's running your Lambda function code and compromise it. But it doesn't mean that it does. But they don't do anything for your application level security. So if your code is vulnerable to SQL injection, you're still going to be vulnerable to SQL injection. Doesn't matter where your code runs on. So you still have to look after your application vulnerabilities, and also importantly, the vulnerability in your dependencies. And that means services like Snyk is really good in terms of helping you monitor your dependencies and also your transit dependencies, and looking out for known vulnerabilities. And then there are also other, commercial solutions for serverless applications that are more specialized for the serverless workload. Things like PureSec and Protego. So your Lambda function can still be compromised through, for example, code injection attack if you are vulnerable to that, or someone just compromising one of your NPM dependencies, which we have seen happen multiple times. So one of the most important things in terms of some of the high top items to think about for serverless security is that make sure your functions have got the tightly controlled IAM permission. Don't use star for permissions for your Lambda function. Be really restricted about what each function can do, so that in the case it does get compromised, at least you limit the blast radius in terms of what the attacker can actually do. And also another thing to think about, just in terms of in that regard, is that you want to use as much as possible one IAM role per function. So that again, about providing the least amount of privilege for that individual function. But it's not just about your functions, but it's also about your use of AWS service in general. So if you're building APIs, for internal APIs that should only be used by your own system, use IAM to protect the endpoints. And then for anything that's user facing, that should be accessed by the client directly, use something like Cognito or custom or authorize the function. And then everything else, if you're doing like a SaaS app that want to really limit your clients, then use API keys. API keys should be the last thing you should use. And then for there's also protection against the DDoS attacks, making sure that you have a WAF enabled on CloudFront or API Gateway, and also enabling throughput limits on your API endpoints. I actually wrote a blog post recently talking about the fact that the default throughput limits just doesn't make sense, because it applies your regional limit on individual endpoints, so that the attacker just need one to take down all your APIs in the region. So there's quite a lot of things to really think about, because again, there's a lot of tools out there, but you need to know how to use them well.
Understanding the concepts.
Serverless
or non-serverless, understand the concepts, apply them.
Serverless is a lot more secure. By comparison, but they're still they're still vulnerable to different forms of attack, and especially anything you do in your application, you should still need to think about how this can be compromised, because even though someone might not compromise your infrastructure, they can compromise your application code at the application level.
What do you think is next for the serverless world?
Good question. I am not 100% sure, but I do know that the number of blockers that people have today, they will all be addressed in terms of them having more predictable performance, not having to worry about cold starts, and some of the other issues around just general limits around scalability and other things. I'm sure all of those in terms of use cases that doesn't go well with services today, they're all going to get fixed. We already saw things like being able to do WebSockets easily with serverless. Before that was one of the things that you just couldn't really do with serverless, where you have a persistent a connection where you need to have a persistent server, and things like some of the machine learning workloads that are not really well suited for serverless right now. I'm sure the platform themselves is going to innovate and then make the things a lot better in terms of having very quick access to large files systems, maybe like EFS and something like that. But also just in terms of the raw performance you can get from your functions, having more predictable latencies, all of that. So I definitely know that those things are going to improve massively. In terms of what else is going to come after that, I mean, personally, I'm hoping more things will be sort of done for the step functions and other things like that, which makes it easier for you to build applications and compose them in more interesting ways. Because individual functions only gets you so far. Is when you need to compose things together. Step functions and SAR, I think SAR itself, service application repository itself, needs a lot more love than it's getting right now.
Functions?
So step function is an orchestration engine that allows you to sort of build up a workflow, such like a payment workflow that then hooks into Lambda functions as well as other AWS services. So they've made a lot of strides towards that, but there's still issues around, it's quite expensive for service, probably one of the most expensive, I would say, on AWS. So I typically use it for business critical workflows where I'm happy to pay extra for the things it gives me. But for a lot of things where I would like to use it for more, I guess, nicer programming model, nicer traceability, and all of that, it's just not a good fit because how expensive it is by comparison to other things.
Effective. Are they looking to reduce those costs in future or make it more manageable or attractive?
Fingers crossed.
Good. Let's hope.
Let's hope. Yeah.
If you had some advice for a Jan that's coming into the industry now, that's a scary thought, by the way. A Jan coming into the industry, so let's call them junior engineers. I don't like to label people too much, but engineers coming into the industry, what's your best bit of advice for someone right now?
Yeah, so I actually wrote a blog post on this recently, and they had a really good, response on dev.to. In terms of, I guess you should go read that. But in terms of the sort of high level, the really sort of top, advice I'll give is that as a junior developer, your biggest challenge is just earning the trust of the people around you. So one of the best way to do that, I find, is find an area of the business that's area of your application or business that is A, business critical, and also B, there's no good domain experts in the team already. Especially in large companies, you find this all the time. Some really business critical application, legacy system, nobody want to touch them, but they all have to interact with it somehow. So be the go-to guy on that system. And all of a sudden, you're going to find yourself much more valuable and held in high esteem in the team. And people is going to come to you to ask questions. And then that's where you know, okay, I'm really being accepted and respected by my peers. I think that's that's very important advice. Another thing I would also say is that when you're still early on in your career, prioritize learning over earning. I mean, once you become good at something, money is going to find you no matter what.
100%. I say that myself as well. And I think, I think it's a really, really tough point to touch at times because it's hard to understand that, but learning over earning, in your words, 1,000%.
Yeah, when I started my career, I started with Credit Suisse, a big investment bank, and I was there for maybe 2-3 years, and then at that point I realized, wait, people are doing all this crazy stuff outside, but I'm still building app that's used by 20 people, and I'm not really learning as much as I should be. And at that point, to get out of the sort of banking sector, it was quite hard because you get typecast into the finance industry, so that literally all I got offered for in terms of interviews was another bank down the road somewhere. And I was really lucky to eventually got an interview with Gamesys and moved there, and that kind of changed my career projective. But at the same time, I had to take a pretty significant pay cut to do that. But in terms of the overall, the long term wise, my career would be nowhere near where it's today if I just stick within banking and take the good money that I had at the time.
100%. Okay. Other end of the spectrum, if you're a senior engineer, sorry, no labels, but you're a more experienced engineer, what would you say to someone that's rising up the ranks to continue doing, stop doing? And again, I appreciate it's probably the emphasis on learning over earning, but what would you say go and do as a senior engineer?
I would say for a senior engineer, and I've seen this quite a lot as well, the senior engineer get to the point where they want career progression, but they don't know where to go. And maybe they don't have they don't know how to improve themselves to get to the next level in terms of become a principal, tech lead, and so on. Okay. One role would be to go to management, but then again, just because you're a good engineer, it doesn't make you a good manager, and 100%. Vice versa. And I would say if you're looking for career progression, but not in the sort of management track, then rethink how you what your role is as an engineer in terms of the value you provide. Yeah. Because as senior engineers, we like to put our head down and just write code every day, and we kind of measure ourselves in terms of our output, how many new features we shipped, how many lines of code that we're doing, how many requests that we per second that we improving the system on. That's all important, but that's just about execution. Yeah. Companies hire engineers not just so that they can produce more code. Yeah. That is just what they do in order to deliver the actual thing that you want from them as a business, which is business value, which can be more revenue streams. It could be improve the user experience that increases the revenue, all of that. And so you have to shift your mindset in terms of, instead of how can I do more to optimize my output, how can I do more to improve my impact on the business? Gotcha. And that's, for example, when I joined the Zone as a principal engineer. During my time there, the most important thing I did to the company was to fix the recruitment process. Was to build up the brand for the developer community so that we could hire people more easily. So my personal output as an engineer, as an individual contributor, was probably the lowest I've ever had in my career. But I've had massive impact on the company by doing the things that needed to be done in order to help the company get to the point where they can deliver their vision. So without doing those things, I guess we wouldn't know each other. We wouldn't be sitting here today. And that the Zone's trajectory would have been very different as well. So understand that you need to change your mindset and try to optimize your impact on the company. If that probably doesn't require writing code. And that's something that you have to be okay with and happy to do, and start doing that.
Your impact for those guys touched tens of people, many of people. What do you think the next scary thought again? What do you think the next 12 months for you looks like?
Good question. I like the answer to be, I don't know.
Fine, okay.
So right now I'm doing a mix of working with Lumigo as a developer advocate, helping to build up and strengthen the serverless community. At the same time, also doing probably spend half my time working with independent direct clients, as an independent consultant, helping them with adopting serverless, for example. So I imagine next 12 months I'll be probably doing more of the same, because this is a relatively new thing for me, and I'm so far really enjoying it.
Okay. And companies or individuals listening, can we or they engage you in Europe, or is it just London?
They can engage me in all over Europe. I'm really happy to travel anywhere in Europe. Based in Amsterdam nowadays, so it's become a really nice, easy hub to commute. I also have got clients in the US and Australia, where I do just remote sessions. So people can engage me for all kinds of different ways. I'm really happy to help people out, so long your project is mostly serverless. If you've got a containerized container application that you want to build, maybe I'm not the right person to ask.
Okay, someone else, please. So I guess point being, EU, London, on-site if needed, anywhere else worldwide, remote options. And day rates will obviously apply, or consultancy or fees apply. You've been a pleasure. Honestly, I really, really appreciate it. So thank you. And you can catch Jan on Twitter and some other areas. I'll copy and paste his bits and pieces in.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure.
See ya.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this episode. Massively appreciate you listening and checking in with us. If you want to find out more about us and what we're doing, please check us out on social media. what we're trying to do at Enginears is build a community to drive knowledge sharing and experiences. On Twitter, we can be found Enginears.io, it's no_. We've also got a website which is engineers.io. These links will all be posted in the description. Any feedback and comments are massively appreciated. We're always looking to improve on where we can. Thanks, guys.